Watch me eat the camera. Quit it, Buttercup!
Oh, hey there! It's Bubbles. I heard you guys are having a hard time classifying your sentences and statements. Don't you worry, because we, the Powerpuff Girls, are here to save the day.
Well, yeah, I'm Buttercup. Let's talk about our grammatical sentences. There are 5 different kinds of it. The first one is the interrogative one. This is usually used when you ask questions such as,
Hey, have you seen Mojo Jojo?
"No, I haven't." Well, that was a correct way of using it. Anyway, let's move on to more examples of it. Moving on, if you issue a command, you're stating an imperative sentence. For example,
Will you check on Mojo Jojo?
"Not now, Bubbles." As I was saying, more examples of it are, "Can you help me review?" or "Lower down your voice."
Oh, is it my turn now? Okay, so next we have the expletive sentence. So this is usually used when you are daydreaming or when you want to express a desire or a wish. Like for example, I hope I get an Uno on Philo 1, or I wish to be a psychometrician someday. Fourth, we have the exclamatory sentence. My favorite. Like this is what I always use. Isn't it obvious? This is used when you want to express excitement or when you feel pleasure over something. Like for example, what a presentation! Or this is interesting.
Lastly, we have the declarative sentence. A declarative sentence is used to provide information or state a fact. Some examples include, "Philo 1 is one of our subjects in the first semester," or "I passed the UPCAT exam." Remember in our Unit 1 where we learned about concepts and words? A word is made up of letters, while a concept is made up of ideas.
So, a sentence is made up of words, while a statement is made up of concepts. This could also be used in different sentences. Like for example, the cat is on the mat and the mat has a cat on it. You see, same statement, different words.
You could even express the same statement in different sentences. You could say it in different languages. Like in Filipino, "Ang pusa ay nasa ibabaw ng bani." Same concept, different sentence.
Yes, that's right, Buttercup. However, are these all the kinds of sentences?
There are countless kinds of use that we call sentence, symbols, and words. Using sentence to assert a knowledge plays a vital role in the use of language.
So, it simply means that in this, we are referring to how sentences can convey information and express beliefs about the world.
In addition, sentences should not just string words together, but also make propositions that can be evaluated for truth, explaining that knowledge claim should have its own truth value. In short, it must be identified as truth or false.
Therefore, interrogative, imperative, expletive, and exclamatory sentences are meaningless in making statements. That is when the declarative sentence takes place. In asserting knowledge claim, it is significant to use this sentence. Why? Because it helps in asserting or denying something.
Let's take this as an example. When you utter, "I hope to be a psychometrician someday," even if the desire comes true or not, it will not be falsified.
On the other hand, the declarative sentence, "I passed the UPCAT exam," may be classified as true or false, for it is meant to convey information. So this means that this kind of sentence has a truth value, unlike the others.
The use of declarative sentence is not only important in logic, but also in epistemology. How? Logic helps us in the understanding and constructing of arguments, while epistemology helps us explore the nature and justification of knowledge.
Did you know that 3 formal logicians agreed on 3 basic principles for analyzing whether statements are true or false?
Actually, Aristotle, an ancient philosopher, labeled them as the 3 laws. However, our friend Acuña doesn't like calling them the laws. So starting with our first principle, we have the principle of identity. This states that if a statement is true, then it is true, and if a statement is false, then it is false.
The truth value isn't changing, constant, and regular. Here's an example. If you have determined that the statement, "the Powerpuff Girls has 3 members" is true, then the truth value of the statement will be kept indefinitely over time.
However, if an instance, in the blink of an eye, this turns out to be false, it will create a havoc in logic.
Oh, so this means that the principle of identity is only applicable to a world that is stable. Following this, we have the principle of non-contradiction. It states that a statement cannot both be true and false at the same time in the same respect.
But wait, I would like to give you a warning. Many intelligent people often confuse these, even though it may seem simple and easy. It is due to the fact that this principle is often confused with the principle of inconsistency.
Again, don't worry, because the Powerpuff Girls are here to save the day.
The principle of contradiction happens when two statements are directly contradictory.
If one being true, then the other must be false.
For example, if the sky is blue during the day, then the statement "the sky is not blue during the day" must be false. This is what we call the truth-functional relationship.
On the other hand, the principle of inconsistency is when two statements cannot be both true but can be false. For example, the statement "the sky is blue during the day" and "the sky is orange during the day" are inconsistent because they cannot both be true at the same time. However, both can be false if, for example, the sky is white during the day.
In simple terms, contradictions deals with direct opposites where one must be true, the other is false. Meanwhile, inconsistencies include statements that cannot be both true but can be both false. Got it?
Got it!
For our last principle, we have the principle of excluded middle. This means that a statement can have only two truth values. Either it is true only or it is false.
Let me give you an example. The statement, "Chemical X caused Mojo Jojo's genes to mutate," cannot both be true and false simultaneously. It can't be kind of true or have other value. Understood?
Also, note that this principle is important in the formal logic because it makes sure that the statement in the symbolic system only has two truth values. However, not all symbolic system does this.
Here's the catch. The third value, called probability, is excluded from the consideration and analysis of the statements in the two-deductive logic, which provides support for a definition. For instance, some symbolic and empirical statements allow for more than just a true or false, like in statistics. Statements might be assigned values that represent likelihood, such as 0.8 true or 80% likely.
In addition to what you said, the principle of excluded middle is important in traditional logic, wherein statements are simply true or false. It is not always used in other kinds of logic, especially in the real-world situation.
Make sure to keep all of this in mind, for it will be helpful in making a knowledge claim. Welcome back, everyone! I am here again with Buttercup, and we are here to report on the different type of knowledge claims.
Yeah, because apparently we only have two kinds of knowledge claims. So let's get straight into it.
Exactly! 2 types of knowledge claims. It all started with these guys from the 1930s called the logical positivists, led by Moritz Schlick, and they were inspired by David Hume's epistemological framework, a philosopher from way back the 1700s.
Hume said there are only two sources of knowledge: reason, where we get formal knowledge, and sense of perception, where we get empirical knowledge. It's like a super simple formula.
Formal knowledge comes from using reason. We find it in things like math, logic, and geometry. Super certain and always right.
Yeah, that's called an analytic statement. It comes from formal knowledge claim. And then we've got empirical knowledge. And it comes from our senses. You know, stuff like physics, biology and psychology.
Oh, like when you say the sun will rise tomorrow. It is an empirical statement because it is based on what we observed in the real world.
Exactly. So formal knowledge means reasons, while empirical knowledge means senses.
Right, but it gets even better. These two types of knowledge claims are backed up by different theories of truth.
Yeah, because you need to prove what's true somehow, right? So if you're talking about empirical stuff like the sun will rise, you need to prove it using the correspondence theory of truth. You check it with your senses.
And formal knowledge claims are verified by coherence theory of truth. You don't need to see or touch anything, just use reason. If I say, my classmates are noisy, I can tell if it's true by listening to the sound of the room. Empirical claims are very easy to figure out because they're based on things that we can experience.
But if we're talking about something like the sum of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides, that's a formal claim. You don't need to see a triangle in real life to prove that theory.
Right, that's because formal claims use analytic statements, and we can use our brains to check if they're true by making sure they're logical and coherent.
Yeah, but first let's break it down. What is an analytic claim? Well, it's pretty simple. It is when the truth of a statement comes from the definition of the word themselves. So if I said all bachelors are unmarried men, then that just means that bachelors are unmarried men. But if someone tried to say that all bachelors are married,
That's absurd! Total contradiction! This is what Kant was getting at when he said the predicate, or the part of the sentence that tells us something about the subject, is already contained in the subject. In this case, the unmarried male part is what it means to become a bachelor.
so how do we know if these analytic claims are true? We use something called the coherence theory of truth.
Right! Denying those statements are silly, but if I say something like, all bachelors are unhappy, then that's not an analytic statement anymore.
And if we try to deny it like bachelors are married or fathers aren't male parents, then you'll get contradictions. That's how you know it's an analytic statement. Yep, that's empirical. You will need to ask a bunch of bachelors if they're unhappy or not, because the word unhappy isn't a part of the definition of a bachelor. It is outside of the context.
So, here's a cool trick to know if your statement is analytical. Try denying it. If your denial sounds ridiculous, like for example, bachelors are married men, then that means that you are dealing with an analytic claim.
But if the denial sounds reasonable, like bachelors can be happy, then it is probably empirical.
Wow, this is so much fun. So just remember, analytic claims are true because of the meaning of the word themselves. And we use the coherence theory to check if they fit with how we use language.
And when you try to deny them, you'll end up sounding like you don't know what you're talking about. Let us further discuss analytic statements. It has a paradigm. That means the model or framework. Analytic statements come from formal systems like mathematics and logic.
Think of math. For example, 5 plus 7 is equal to 12. That's an analytic statement because it's true within the system of arithmetic. You don't need to check anything in the real world. It's true because of the rules of math.
Same goes for geometry. Take this. The sum of all angles of a triangle is equal to 180. That is always true because that is the definition of a triangle in geometry. And you can't argue with that unless you want to sound ridiculous.
Oh, and here's a fun one. Two parallel lines will never meet. That's an analytical statement. It's built into the definition of parallel lines.
This kind of statements are called tautology. Like when I say, either I pass in Philo 1 or I don't. Because it is always true no matter what.
Yep, they're true by definition. These statements fall under what we call the well-formed formulas or WFFs in math and logic. Their truth doesn't depend on the real world. It's about how they fit together logically.
Now, here's where things got controversial. The logical positives thought that there were only two meaningful statements, analytical and empirical. Either it is logically true or it can be verified in the real world.
But here's where it gets tricky. What about those statements that don't fit into either category? Like, moral and ethical statements?
Well, the logical positive said, if you can verify it, it's meaningless, which is a pretty bold move.
Whoa, so they thought things like practice what you preach and sex without love is immoral didn't count as meaningful statements?
Exactly. They were dismissing things like moral, aesthetic, religious, and political statements. Basically, anything that wasn't analytical or empirical was out.
But wait, Hume, remember him? He said that passions and emotions are the real sources of knowledge. When we make evaluative claims like saying if something is good or bad, right or wrong, we express our genuine ideas based on our feelings.
Yeah, that's where evaluative claim comes in. These are judgments whether a statement is valuable or worthless. For example, when you say sex education should be taught in school, you are not making an analytical or empirical claim. You're stating an evaluative claim that is based on values, emotions, and judgments.
And these kind of statements can be tricky. They might sound like they're just opinions, but Hume and others thought that they still had value. The difference is, you can prove them the same way you prove a math problem.
Right, so if we're talking about evaluating something, whether it is moral, legal, or even aesthetic, we need to look at the public approval, or something that we call the intersubjective consensus.
Oh, that means that if a bunch of people agree on something like the sunset is beautiful, then it's kind of accepted as true, even if you wouldn't be able to measure it as you would with science.
But Bubbles, let's not forget about commands, shall we? Sometimes when you make an evaluative claim, they come out as instructions, like do not cheat on the exam. That's a prescriptive statement. It tells you what not to do.
Or like, you should study every day, something that I don't usually do. That's a prescriptive statement. It tells you what you ought to do.
And yeah, if you flip them around like saying, it's okay to cheat, people will think that's wrong based on the public consensus and shared values.
So, we've got 3 types of knowledge claims. First, analytic claims, where the truth comes from definition and logic. Next, empirical claims, where you can check with your senses. And lastly, the evaluative claims, where you can base things on values, emotions, and public agreement.
Exactly, and when it comes to evaluating the truth of which, you've got different methods. Coherence for analytic claims, correspondence for empirical claims, and public consensus for evaluative claims.
That's it! So this has been Bubbles, and I hope we saved your day. Bye!
So next time, when someone throws fancy words at you, remember, it's always about how we know things. And that's a wrap for Powerpuff Report.
Oh, that was very helpful.